With me this morning, Mike Hanewald. Mike is field agronomist for Beck's Hybrids in Michigan. Mike, what kind of progress are we seeing as it relates to corn and soybean harvest in Michigan?
So we've been blessed with some pretty good weather the last 2 weeks across most of the state of Michigan. There's certainly isolated areas that have had some challenges, but made a lot of progress in soybean harvest, especially in the last week to 10 days. And so estimates from talking with our seed advisor, soybean harvest is running 50 to 60% complete or more, depending on your area. Yields have overall been pretty good considering the year that we've had, but highly variable. A lot of inconsistency in yield across the state. I've heard reports anywhere from 20 to 80 bushels per acre, but I think 40 to 60 catches most of what I've been hearing. But considering how late we planted and the challenging year we've had, I think most farmers that I've been talking to have been pleased with what they're getting.
What about corn? What are you hearing on corn?
Corn, we're just kind of getting a start. So a lot of the silage has been chopped, and silage yields have been average to slightly above average. Again, guys are happy with the silage yields that they've been getting considering the year that we've had. But the overall grain corn, we're just getting a start. And so it's difficult to have a real handle on where we're at as far as corn yields go. I've heard some pretty impressive yield reports. The corn certainly looks like there's a lot of potential out there, but we just haven't run all that much of it yet.
Mike, I know there's some areas in Michigan that got planted a little bit later, and I'm guessing that frost freeze event for a couple weekends ago impacted the crop. Tell me about that. What are you seeing? What are customers asking you about as it relates to corn in that event?
So most of what we've seen so far, the corn, most of it has black layered, and so that corn is okay as far as frost impacting it. The corn that was not black layered, fortunately, most of what I've seen, the frost was some slight frost damage near the tops of the plant canopy and along the edges of fields, but you get out into the field and it seems like most of that corn was protected to where the plants are still alive. There's certainly exceptions to that, but for the most part, I think we've been fortunate that the frost hasn't been devastating yet to this point. We'll have to see how things progress, but the frost damaged corn certainly is going to be drying down probably slower than what we would anticipate for normal dry down.
What about dry down overall? What are growers asking you as it relates to the corn crop right now?
So I've heard of a few guys that have had some drier corn from some of the earlier planted corn down below 20%, but those reports from what I've been hearing have been few and far between, unfortunately. And I think that's been the biggest disappointment most growers are finding is how wet the corn still is. And unfortunately, it's probably not going to dry down a whole lot. Our weather forecast for the next week to 10 days across the state doesn't show a lot of heat. And when you're talking 25 to 30 heat units to dry down 1 point of moisture in a 70-degree day, an average 70-degree day, getting you about 10 heat units. It takes a lot of heat to dry this corn down, and unfortunately, it just doesn't look like we're going to get a whole lot of it. And so I've been encouraging guys to be, taking a look at your fields. If you see any potential stalk weaknesses or issues, get those fields harvested sooner rather than later. But we really need to get going on corn harvest as soon as we wrap up with beans and just keep steady moving through. So.
Mike, you had mentioned earlier that tar spot was popping up quite a bit over the state of Michigan. How should growers react to that as it relates to harvest?
So almost all the fields of corn that I've seen that have been impacted by tar spot in Michigan this year have been very minor impacts. The tar spot came in late enough due to the drier weather that we had earlier in the grain fill period for corn. The tar spot didn't develop as rapidly, and so it came in really late. And so we've seen pretty minimal yield and stalk impacts so far with tar spot, but I think it's important to note the fields that you have it in, because after what we saw last year and seeing it again this year, I think tar spot is here to stay, and we're going to need to make some management decisions on how to deal with that if it moves in earlier next year. And so just make a note of where you have it and keep that in mind for those fields going back to corn next year.
Fantastic. That's a harvest update from Mike Hanewald, Mike, the field agronomist for Beck's in Michigan. Mike, thank you very much. Have a safe harvest.
Thanks a lot, Jim.